Today, the Coalition is announcing its intention to introduce a bill into the Parliament next week that will remove bikies and other organised criminal elements from Victorian taxpayer-funded worksites. It's something that the Allen Labor government should have done but won't do and has failed to do. This bill will be comprehensive in removing those elements from our workplaces, something that should have happened a long time ago. David will speak a bit more about the detail in a moment. I renew the calls by my colleagues and I for Jacinta Allen to abandon her independent review, so-called, and opt for a fair dinkum review, the Royal Commission we proposed last week. Let's recap. It is clear that the Premier's independent review won't allow for public hearings. It won't allow for any consideration of criminal conduct that can be referred to law enforcement agencies. And it won't compel anybody to attend. Now, under the Inquiries Act, I think it's important by way of background just to note, the Premier has three options under the Inquiries Act: a Royal Commission, which we've called for, the only thing that can actually uncover the real truth about the terrible things that have been happening on Victorian taxpayer-funded worksites. But she could have gone for a Board of Inquiry, which still has compellable powers. She didn't do that. Let's understand, Premier Jacinta Allen chose a formal review precisely because it has no powers to compel the production of documents or to compel the attendance of witnesses. What do we really expect to come out of this review? And let's bear in mind also, Premier Jacinta Allen's independent review by Mr. Wilson has to provide an interim report in 4 weeks. What does Mr. Wilson hope to uncover in just 4 weeks with no compellable powers, no ability to investigate and refer on allegations of criminal misconduct, no ability to compel the production of evidence or the attendance of witnesses, and then has to provide a formal report 12 weeks after that? This is a sham review. It's not going to lead to the truth. It's going to be a cover-up. It's going to be a political solution that Premier Jacinta Allen is looking to achieve to protect herself and her bumbling ministers from real scrutiny. And that just brings me to the final point I just want to make before handing over to David. We saw another minister this morning, Minister Sonia Kilkenny, stumble when asked about when she was told about this kind of misconduct on taxpayer-funded worksites, and gave no detail about what she specifically did, what she referred on, what she was told. This is now a circus, and it's not allowing for any proper scrutiny. Minister after minister, including the Premier, stumbling before the cameras when asked basic questions about what they knew, when they knew it, and what they specifically did about it, only proves the case for a proper Royal Commission, something Premier Jacinta Allen won't do, it seems, because she's more interested in putting her political interests before the interests of the Victorian people.
Well, Victorians do not want their state to be known as a gangster state, and that's why we're going to clean it up. The rotten big build is something that we've seen being dominated by these bikie outlaw motorcycle gangs and gangsters, mobsters. They've got to be cleaned up. And so what we will do is we will ban bikie gangs from the big build to restore confidence and integrity back into these really important projects. These are taxpayer-funded construction sites that have been infiltrated by these gangsters, mobsters, bikie gangs. And I think Victorians have had enough of this. A Premier that says she didn't know that this was going on, no one believes that. No one believes that Jacinta Allen only woke up a few days ago and realised that we had these gangsters, mobsters and bikie gangs on the big build. These are signature projects that got the government elected on a number of occasions now, and these are projects that are rotten. These are projects that need to be cleaned up, and we will do this by ensuring that those people that are not fit and proper to be working on the big build are removed from the big build. And that includes fairly and squarely bikies and those that are involved in criminal activities in terms of these types of gangs, these types of organised crime. Organised crime, bikie gangs have no place on the big build or construction sites funded by the taxpayer, and that's why our plan will be to remove them from the big build. And we will be calling on the government to back this plan. If the government is serious, if Jacinta Allen is serious of cleaning up this mess, she should be supporting this private members bill when we introduce it next week. This will be the first thing that we will put on the agenda in the Parliament when we go back from the winter break. And if Jacinta Allen is serious about cleaning up the mess, she and her government should be supporting this bill.
How will you identify bikie members?
Yeah, so we already have a number of people that are caught up in terms of outlaw motorcycle gangs. There will be a criminal check, just like any other check that we have, the police check. And if people are caught up with organised crime, they are not fit and proper to be working on the big build.
Just to be clear, is it the current police check?
Correct. So it's a current police check which will identify those people that have criminal records, and it is no different to the thousands of people each and every day that do police checks.
So is it mandatory though for construction companies to seek a police check?
We would be saying going forward
What's the
that
mechanism?
we would be saying going forward that would be the requirement if you want to work on a government job. If you want to work on a taxpayer-funded job, you need to make sure that the people working for you are not involved in bikie gangs, and this will clean it up.
And will you give police the resources to be able to process these probably hundreds, thousands more checks they may have to do?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think we've got to clean this mess up, and that's what most taxpayers would expect. The big build is rotten to the core, and there are billions of taxpayers' money that has been wasted on these projects. They've got to be cleaned up, and this will enable that. This will enable the police checks that we're used to. It's a process that happens on so many other work sites and businesses. Teachers, health professionals, and so many others deal with this each and every day. This is something that we should expect. We would expect those people to be working on taxpayer-funded construction sites to do the same.
So no one with a criminal record will be allowed on a taxpayer-funded construction
Those that are involved in organised crime or bikie gangs will not be allowed on a big build site.
What if they have a spent conviction? Their involvement, say, allegedly in a criminal gang was 10, 15, 20 years ago. They've reformed, they've proven to the community that they're no longer associated with such gangs.
Yeah.
Are you ruling them out from being on a site?
Yeah, so spent convictions are something that we've also looked at here. I mean, we don't want to be, we want to be able to allow people that are fair and are reasonable to work on those sites to work on them, and that's fine. We have no issues with that. What we have an issue with now are those people that are currently being convicted of a criminal offence that relating to bikie gangs. And this type of thing, that's what we are focused on, and that's what needs to be cleaned up.
So just to be clear, anyone with a spent conviction could still be on the building site under your proposed bill?
Once a spent conviction has gone through its process, we would certainly entertain that. But this is the focus here is those here and now that are dealing with a criminal activity.
What about a drug trafficking conviction, but not a membership to a bikie gang? Where would you sit that?
This is very much around organised crime and bikie gangs. And if a drug-related activity is to do with organised crime, absolutely, they should not be on a big build site.
Private members' bills are usually doomed to fail in terms of the government's eyes. They don't vote for private members' bills. I mean, is this a foregone conclusion that you put it up and it would just be tossed to one side, or they'd wave it off?
This is an integrity bill, and this is an integrity test for Jacinta Allen. If she is serious about cleaning up the big build, she would back this bill.
My understanding this morning was you were also talking about people who have, associations with organised crime which wouldn't show up on a national police check. How would you deal with that?
Well, again, fundamentally we are looking at those people that are involved in organised crime and bikies, and certainly a lot of that we believe would come under a police check. This will be the lever that will ultimately ensure that we can clean up this mess. And absolutely, if there is...
If they've never been convicted of a crime, how can you be sure? They're involved in organised crime, but perhaps they're not ever convicted of it. So how you...
Correct. But if there is enough information there to have somebody charged and going through that process, then they should be removed. This is all about being able to utilise the laws that are in play, but also importantly, to ensure, just like any other workplace where you have these police checks as part of ensuring that you have the right people in the workplace in the first place. Currently, that doesn't apply on the big build. Currently, it is a gaping hole in the current project in the way that it's worked, and it's something that could be fixed straight away. There are many other things that we could do, and there are many other things that the government should be doing, including the Royal Commission that JP has mentioned. But this is something that we could do right now. It is simple, it is an easy fix, and if the government is serious about cleaning up the big build, they should be supporting the private members' bill.
And who would you make it the responsibility of to keep tabs? The employers, one of the government departments? Who would you make it the responsibility? A minister?
Yeah, so again, it should be up to, as part of the work conditions and any contractor seeking a work on a government project, this is part of the requirements. There are a number of requirements that currently a contractor needs to abide by before going a contract, and this should be simply that they have met that requirement and tick that box for them to therefore be eligible to contract for that work. It should be an obligation on the contractor and the employer to do that, but it is no different to any other tender process that they currently are involved in. It should be a requirement, and ultimately it should be something that we would expect to be done. And if there is a breach, then obviously there is an obligation on the employer that has broken that breach. We need to keep this simple. Well, we need to keep this simple. So it is no different in terms of that obligation of doing a police check. We don't want to create a whole lot of bureaucracy with this. We want to make it just like any other workplace that has police checks, working with children checks. This is what we would be doing in this set of circumstances to make it very easy to ensure that we clean up the big build, we remove bikies from the big build, and that's what I think most Victorians expect. They expect that we have a big build site and taxpayer-funded construction sites free from bikies, and this is a very easy thing for Jacinta Allen to do.
Just a question for John, if that's all right. Thanks, Dave. On your read of sounds like you've overnight read the Inquiries Act. On your read of it,
I was familiar with it when I worked in the government back in 2014.
So on your understanding of it, under the formal review, can a public hearing actually be called under a formal review, or is that just not available?
Well, they could, but they won't. And Mr Wilson is not armed with the powers of a Royal Commissioner or a member of a Board of Inquiry. So there's nothing to compel Premier Jacinta Allen to appear. Now, it was interesting that Premier Jacinta Allen said she would be happy to appear before Mr Wilson's review. Why wouldn't she? She knows the outcome. She wasn't prepared to appear before the parliamentary inquiry into the Commonwealth Games debacle, which she caused. So Premier Jacinta Allen has established a review she knows will go nowhere, and the timeframes involved for such a significant and large matter like corruption and standover tactics on taxpayer-funded work sites can't be completed in 4 weeks, which is the period for the interim report, or the 12 weeks after that for the final report. It's just a joke. It can't be taken seriously.
Should the government release correspondence of any referrals that's made off to Fair Work, other agencies in regards all correspondence from
Yes.
any ministers, MPs?
Yes, the government...
Openness and transparency.
Yeah. In the interests of transparency and scrutiny, Premier Jacinta Allen and her ministers should release all correspondence in and out relating to referrals about misconduct and standover tactics and bullying on taxpayer-funded work sites, and they should also release internal working documents. These are serious matters about what Premier Jacinta Allen and the ministers knew, when they knew it, and what they did about it, which is, as we're finding out, zero.
Will you seek any of those documents through an under-house documents motion?
Yes, we will, and also FOI and other avenues at our disposal, even though we expect that the Allen Labor government will do everything they can to thwart any kind of disclosure about these materials. But in the public interest, they should be disclosed.
This
And
private members bill, it seems like it's the plans for it have kind of been wound back throughout the day. This morning it definitely seemed like there was room for kind of like anti-consorting,
Yeah.
but which would not come under a police check. Now you seem to be saying it's just a national police check for people working on
Yeah, there will be police checks, but there is an avenue through not only this bill but other statutes on the books, including the Criminal Organisations Control Act, where steps can be taken to remove people from associations with other criminal elements. So this is part of a suite of things that we've announced and that we will continue to announce. So you'll
But
recall...
that's why they have to have a conviction, whereas like my understanding is you're talking about people who
Well,
aren't necessarily convicted.
under the COCA Act, they don't have to have that. There can be evidence that the police can rely upon there. So there's a range of measures in place. But what this bill does, which is unique and essential, is that it puts a legislative burden on parties to major projects to actually investigate the history of the people who come and work on taxpayer-funded work sites. So there's a provision there for criminal background checks, and there are provisions for how that relates to associations in light of that material with organised crime elements. So it's a very important part, but it fills a gap in the existing system because it applies to the contractors to major projects, as David was saying. We've already announced the formation that we will implement in government Construction Enforcement Victoria, along with the construction code as part of those. The bill we've talked about today will be part of the reforms that those measures will introduce.
So following from your question earlier about the resourcing. I mean, there's going to be thousands of extra police checks and extra checks that don't come under that, seemingly. How would that be resourced? How is this possible?
The resources will be there, and let's understand, if you do nothing, you get $40 billion plus in blowouts. That's why we have to do something. So the investment in the extra resourcing, bearing in mind that a lot of this already occurs under the COCA Act and other police checks that Victoria Police undertakes, a lot of this work is already being undertaken. So any resourcing that's required in addition to that would obviously be met, but we expect that within the existing system, this work that this bill will require is already being done.
Saturday and Sunday State Council are testing your leadership, particularly when members consider whether party funds should fund your legal cases and the election of the branch president, whether it's your support of Phil Davis or Graham Watt, will test your leadership.
Yeah, they're matters that the party will resolve. There are always contested elections at State Council of the Liberal Party. It's a robust gathering, as it should be. We're a democratic party, and I look forward to attending on Saturday and Sunday.
Any concerns from your end around fire truck safety of fire trucks, the age of the fleet?
Yeah, Victoria's broke because Labor can't manage money, and we're seeing that play out now in emergency services. No money to invest in new assets like fire trucks, no money to upgrade assets. I travel around Victoria, I talk to members of FRV, the CFA, the SES. The common complaint I get, like cries from the heart, are please fund us so we can protect the Victorian people. And we all know why the government can't and won't, because it's running out of money, it can't manage money, and that's why emergency services are struggling the way they are.
Just on my previous question, the federal court have now diarised all the dates for the upcoming trial involving defamation claim against you. Are you planning on attending each day of the federal court that it sits on this case?
Oh, look, I will attend where required, but otherwise I'll await the court proceedings and I'll respect those proceedings.
So only if you're held to witness or held to stand,
Well,
or are you going to be there for the whole thing?
Yeah, I'll be guided by my legal counsel. My focus is on being the alternative premier and working with my colleagues, David and everybody else, particularly at this time where we see a crisis engulfing major projects in Victoria. I'll allow my lawyers to run the case for me and tell me when I'm needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks very much.